Now, in this episode, I talked to Richard to get a behind-the-scenes look at what he has learned about the journey to enlightenment in the last 2 years since his samadhic experience and even his glimpse of cosmic consciousness. Now, this is not the same copy and paste fluff that you can find elsewhere online. This is the direct result of real experience. Don't miss out. Hello, welcome back to the Spiritual Freedom Show with Richard Lawrence. My name is Darren Bull, and this is the podcast helping you to awaken your chakras, to unlock your psychic powers, and to discover true spirituality. So in this episode, you'll learn deep insights into the chakras and the mystical power of Kundalini. You'll also learn how to overcome the samskaras, those habitual patterns of thought that we accumulate over our many lives, and you'll learn how to overcome the materialistic conditioning that we all face on a daily basis. Finally, you'll learn 6 qualities that we can all cultivate and practice on a daily basis in order to help us on our journey to enlightenment. Now, if you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to hit that bell so you don't miss any future conversations between Richard and myself that will go deeper in the next few months into the chakras, into Kundalini, and into the journey to spiritual enlightenment. Richard.
Darren. So I know there's a lot of people out there who've been following your recent experiences that unfolded, in your Kundalini diaries and other interviews, blogs, and podcasts where you've shared over the past couple of years or so. So I thought we'd do kind of like an update, because I think there's some material that we've discussed recently that it's almost it goes into also what happened until the aftermath of those experiences.
Yes,
and what it's been like grappling with that as well.
Yeah.
And I understated, I know, yeah.
Yes.
But I think the reason I think that's interesting is, for everybody, including someone like myself, is that even if we haven't reached that state, there's still things that we're going to talk about today that could still help us be all the more prepared for when we get there.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I thought would be a good way to start is just to maybe ground this whole discussion in those experiences that you had, just to remind people kind of what they were, and then we can transition into the text in Mars Sector 6 that I'd like to share today, and what that's been like, living that in your own experience that we can talk about.
Yeah, so I had the 2 experiences of being on this path for 50 years, and when I say being on this path, I mean being on this path every day.
Yeah.
And all the reasonably available time, and never leaving, which is quite rare. It's not unique, but it's quite rare. I'm only saying this because I felt at the time that I had these experiences not mainly for my own benefit. I mean, it was wonderful for me, but I felt very strongly that, and I'd come to the conclusion that people could look at someone like me and think, well, you've been at this for a long time. You were very close to Dr. King. You've had the highest initiations of anybody, really, if you were to look at the whole in the round, and very senior position, and you haven't gained samadhi. So what chance is there for somebody else? And those thoughts were going, and that spurred me more than any other single thing. And anyway, long story short, yes, I had, in fact, one was, I think, technically in 2022. It was December.
Yeah.
So I had one where I raised the Kundalini and entered samadhic trance, and I call it a very initial, a glimpse. I dip my toe into the ocean, I think.
Yes, that's the word you used. Yeah.
So I don't, what I would stress, one thing I realized from it and from the subsequent one was that I had not raised the Kundalini in its entirety, and that's a key fact. And then I had the later one when I was abroad in Tenerife, actually, and in a perfect conditions to do this. And that was, I managed to raise some Kundalini even higher than the Christ Center. And then I had what I've called embryonic cosmic consciousness, because I don't want to look as I'm claiming I've arrived, because I certainly haven't. But on the other hand, I have got there. I know, and I've done it through this path, entirely through this path, and it really works. So coming to what I realized from that was I was able, when I did this, to detach from the lower centers. But what I didn't do, and I'm very aware of this, is transmute all the energies in the lower centers. So we have certain blockages. In fact, in Sanskrit writings, they're called granthis, I believe. And there are major blockages between certain centers. I've got a newfound appreciation, for example, for those who know it, the second breathing exercise in Realize Your Inner Potential, and the Kundalini visualization that goes with it, which I did, but I'd never really thought, well, why am I doing this? Because in that practice, you're holding the energy at the base of the spine while you hold your breath in, for those who are familiar with this. And I thought, well, what's the point of that? You want to get the energy up. I used to think, but I thought, no, this is as it's taught. I will follow it as it's taught. Now I can see exactly why that's necessary. Because what you need to do is draw down energies. We have a very complicated system of psychic nerve currents. And these nerve currents are called nadis, and some say there are 72,000. I think Dr. King has given a much higher figure than that in one of his lectures.
200 and something.
So there are these are we don't have to know them all. There are three major ones that we do need to know, which is Kundalini, the one on the left of the spine, which is Ida, and the one on, not Kundalini, Susumna in the center of the spine, Ida on the left, Pingala on the right of the spine. Those are the major ones. But there are many, many others. And, through the lives, and this is the difference between an idiot like me and somebody like Dr. King, who was a realized master from another world, somebody like me, and possibly some of our listeners and viewers, through the lives, being very much terrestrial, have gathered what they would call samskaras, or habitual lines of thinking or behavior, patterns of thought, which manifest through the various nadis, activating not only the major chakras, but other chakras too. And they form these patterns and directions, and they have to be reprogrammed to move up to the higher chakras. I mean, the whole quest is to take our energy to the higher chakras. Not that the lower chakras are in any way wrong or bad. They are.
That's a great point,
But they are just overused, and the higher ones are underused. I mean, I think you mentioned to me that at one time there was a physical eye in the center. What's your source of that, by the way?
I think it's something that Dr. King had said.
Dr. King said that. Okay, great. So in that case, we had a physical third eye, as it were, and I would suggest the reason it's gone is because of complete and gross underuse. And that's how we've evolved, therefore, without that. I have a personal belief. It's my opinion. I don't expect anyone else to accept it. I actually think that in the new age, when we really evolve, the heart, the physical heart, will be in the center, not on the left.
Reflecting a proper expression of that.
Yes, I think we've used it in a minimal way. We've used it a tiny bit, and produces sentimentality and certain other, and maybe some more than that. And there was a tremendous link between the physical heart and the heart chakra, of course. So it's just my own theory, and that's all it is. It really belongs in the center, like the chakra. The chakra is I think Mars said it's called the aura, or the etheric existence, the life. The physical body is the reflection. So the physical body should reflect our auric condition.
So it underscores what you're saying even more so. If the physical body is reflected of our underuse or misuse of the chakras,
indeed,
then we'll get the physical manifestation of that.
So coming back to this, the second breathing exercise, you need, first of all, to make sure any energy that's gone up, say, the front of the body, or gone up through a wrong channel or where it shouldn't be, is drawn to the base.
I see.
I've only realized this quite recently, by the way, before it can be risen. And what you want to do is raise it in its entirety. And there are certain blockages. That's one big one at the base. Big blockage there. And then there's another blockage just below the heart chakra. This is a massive step from the solar plexus center to the heart. Predominantly our culture, the way we live on this earth, especially on this plane, is dominated by the lower three chakras.
You can see it around.
And mainly, not always, and not mainly even, activated from the back through the spine either, often at the front of the body. You can activate a chakra without necessarily raising the full Kundalini, consciously at least, to activate it. We do it when we pray. We bring energy down, and it's a wonderful practice for your development. Never mind helping others. You do it to help others. But every time you pray the way Dr. King so brilliantly and uniquely taught it, the greatest system of prayer I know of, and way above the other forms of prayer I've come across, just by the fact that you're activating your heart chakra. That alone takes it to a different level. But every time you do this, you'll start to awaken it a bit. And you'll start to draw Kundalini to some degree in that direction. Where you put your consciousness is where your inner forces will be drawn to magnetically.
Yeah, I think it's even more encouraging about the things like the prayer and other practices that we have, because it's just reinforcing the mystical process that's actually taking place within us, helps to affirm that there is this mystical, metaphysical makeup that we have in our body. And like you say, you have the aura and the chakras, which are the life, and then this is a reflection only. And, because because of materialism and conditioning, all of these things, we've been sort of conditioned to use these lower three centers, or misuse or overuse them. And I think what a lot of people are sort of yearning for, reaching for, is crossing that chasm between the solar plexus and the heart, and the experience that we start to have at that point.
Yeah, I'd like to throw something in, because we talked not too long ago on a show about loneliness and feeling alone.
Yeah.
And one of the great cures, if you do feel lonely, is service. As soon as you're serving others, you're not thinking about yourself. Because loneliness, in the end, to some degree, is maybe very understandable in some cases, but it's a selfish thing. I'm on my own. Once you start,
that's a need that we have at that moment.
Once you start serving others, you'll activate your heart chakra, of course. And this is I can't really put enough words to the wonder of activating your heart chakra. I just couldn't begin to do justice to this. For someone, as I say, who's a real idiot in some ways and has much to learn, and came here imperfect, very much so, into this life, I have realized this transition from these lower three centers to activating the heart centers is so wonderful. It's peaceful. It's liberating.
Yeah.
And it will liberate you to a great degree from feelings like loneliness too. And while you're in that peace, you don't feel that, because you want to serve others. You're not thinking about yourself.
Yeah. That's a great postscript for that show. It's a great point. It's really true. I mean, and I think what you're saying there is that, it's a wonderful focus for our life to think about our life in terms of the chakras that we're activating.
The chakras are everything.
Yeah.
The chakras are the second most valuable thing in existence. Dr. George King.
Dr. George King.
And you say, well, what's the most then? Life. And I believe that the galaxy is the galaxies are the chakras of the universe.
Gosh, yeah.
That's my belief. One time people thought, well, there's a conglomeration of stars and suns in that part of space. Well, let's call that a galaxy. What they didn't realize until the 12 blessings were delivered by the Master Jesus is the galaxy is a living being.
Yeah.
And it has a magnetic body. And it's holding all these life forms in place. It's not haphazard.
Yeah.
It's not random. They haven't just all conglomerated somewhere by accident or chance. I must say, when I was younger, when I was sort of 16, 17, I used to have a thing about, I don't really want to look at the sky, because I think it was, it's an odd thing. It's not a good thing, but I think I knew inside, as soon as I look at the sky, I'd have to change my life completely.
Oh, yeah, like aversion to the truth.
And then I got to the point, by the time I was 18, when I went up actually to Hull University, and I thought, no, I'm past that. I'm not going to carry on, because I had lots of social things going on. And I looked at the sky, and when I did, I thought, okay, this isn't an accident. And you either see that or you don't. I know there are people, atheists, and people say, oh no, that's all what, I don't know how they rationalize it, but you really look at the sky, you think, no, this is God, this is perfect, this is a plan. And then I knew I'd find what I was looking for once I'd done that. And I did. And that was when in Hull, pretty quickly, I found the path. The Theory Society was for me.
Yes.
And I'm sure many have kind of experiences of that kind.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of like there was a part of you that was almost accepting what all the implications of accepting that truth would be.
It was a massive thing to me, looking at that sky and really taking it on and seeing it for what it is.
Yeah.
And it depends, it's like, I think, who was it? Proust, who says something like, it's not a question of seeing new vistas, it's seeing through new eyes. You can look at something. I mean, we've mentioned before, Newton's the classic example. How many people have seen an apple fall from a tree and not gravity?
Yeah.
It's how you're looking.
Exactly.
And this is all to do with, again, with your inner state of consciousness. One thing I'd just like to say before we move, I know to where you want to go, but with these granthis I mentioned, which are the blockages, and when you see some depictions of, and this is something else I've realized since my experiences, you see depictions of these channels I mentioned, Ida and Pingala. If you look at old yogic writings, very good writings, pretty universally agreed, you'll see these 3 knots, as they're sometimes called, or blockages, and they are below the base center. That's where you have to get below the heart center and the Christ center. And you see at those points a crossing over of what they call Ida and Pingala, and they're crossing back, and then that's how it's depicted. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong at all, but I fully believe myself, and this is the only way Dr. King has taught people to visualize it, Ida and Pingala are not meant to cross over. That Ida and Pingala, those 2 channels, I'm sorry if this is a bit technical for some of our listeners and viewers, but those who are interested, I believe are meant to travel Ida on the left, Pingala on the right, not crossing over at all, no blockages, and I don't actually believe myself, even in those diagrams, that Pingala, the right-hand one, crosses over and carries on the left. I think, one is the negative, not a negative bad, but negative pole, while there's positive pole, and they're each side, and that's the way it's meant to be.
So it's more like an artifact of our involution, obviously,
It's, again, resulted from the way we've operated, and it's therefore an accurate depiction, really, of a sort of crossing over of energies, which is this blockage, which isn't meant to be there, but you can transmute it. So to answer your question in one word, I've realized the need to not just detach from, but to transmute the lower energies. And, I found then I understood something which I've never quite understood, which is in the 4th freedom, Mars Sector gives, after he's told you how to gain the highest state of enlightenment, or rather to gain full, let me rephrase that, not the highest state, which is cosmic consciousness, but to attain full enlightenment. He then, after that, gives you some tips as to how to tend it and certain qualities, which I know you're going to go into. And I can see now exactly why he's done that. Because to me, it's little by... If those familiar, again, with the Etheric Society will be familiar with the concept of a special power manipulation. And this is where energies are sent to humanity, possibly to the planet, in great number by cosmic intelligences, good and powerful energies, to benefit our world. Sometimes you'll have after that, certainly in one case I can think of immediately, straight after that you'll have a special control manipulation where those energies have to be stabilized and controlled. See, that's what I can see the need for now. I can see the need for a number of things. When you start to release these lower energies from their detached state, and a lot of this is done unconsciously and subconsciously. I mean, we are experts on planet Earth at detaching from inconvenient, uncomfortable truth.
Everyone.
We are so good at it, and we do it instinctively, and we don't half the time even know we're doing it. But to gain full enlightenment, you can't do that. Those have to come forth, and this does mean conscience.
Is that what you've been experiencing, these different things?
I'm aware of all. I'm having memories of silly things. Like, for example, I went to a boy's birthday party, not even a close friend of mine, when I was 10, and I wasn't very kind to him.
I see.
And I've had my moments of regret about the way I treated him on his 10th birthday at his birthday party. These things come back. Now, the memories, the sort of detail of the memories are not important. Don't think you've got to remember everything that ever happened. What you need to identify are those globules of discolored energy, if you like, impurities, if you like, that need to be transmuted. And until they're released and transmuted, I, for one, will not be able, and nobody else will be able, to raise the Kundalini in its entirety. As Dr. King did, because, as I said at the beginning, he came to Earth, he was pure as the driven snow. He took on karma, yes. In an earth physical body, he did not have these samskaras developed through many lives on earth. he came a purer than an ascended master would be before he even arrived here.
Yeah, I think it just underscores even more like what the difference is between this detachment and this transmutation that we've talked about.
Yeah. I mean, let me say, it didn't make it easy for him. I don't want to give that impression.
Sure.
He still had to do it, and he demonstrated that it can be done, but it was very different.
Let me turn to these words of Mars Sector 6, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it. He says this: the freedom enlightenment is the fruit which can be cultivated in the spiritual garden of terrestrial man, if he tends it with sufficient care, sufficient kindness, sufficient patience, sufficient tolerance, if he tends it with intelligence, if he tends it by manipulating his karmic pattern through the right service, this will grow, blossom, and will bear all fruits. Heed ye well, terrestrials. These are the ways to your freedom. These are the signs which mark the stony path. These are the tests which you will be given. Mark them well, follow them well, and success will be yours.
Yeah, and I think that last passage you read about the signs that mark the stony path refers also back to some of the previous things that have been said before that.
Oh, I see.
I think so.
Yeah.
But either way, it's still very, very true and very revealing. And this is now I understand completely why he gave that where he gave it, which I didn't before.
You mean in the sequence of...
In the sequence, because if you look at, for example, the aphorisms of Patanjali, which I always look to, and I think all yogis look to, the yamas and the niyamas, as they are known, which are, if you like, patterns of behavior and conduct.
Yes, yeah.
Are given right at the beginning before you even start. And basically, you don't get started until you've got those sorted pretty well. And if you look at the Western religion, like they say the 10 Commandments.
They're there.
And there's a wonderful thing, actually, an example of those laws of the 10 Commandments, which aren't followed at all well by the countries that teach them on the whole. Yeah. Because one of them is thou shalt not kill.
Yeah.
And I remember Dr. King, he said in one of his talks, he said that, when he decided to become a conscientious objector, unlike a lot of people in the Second World War, it didn't suit him at all. It wasn't like, oh, that's a way out. It was, what a shame. He was quite very versed in pugilistic, you might say, skills, such as boxing, such as shooting, very good marksman, and other sports at the time, quarterstaffing and so on, which were done in English schools then, and fencing, I believe. Yeah. So he was by nature prone to that, and he liked the excitement of combat. He was combat was in his blood. So for him, that was a massive sacrifice. But he said, an inner voice, or words to this effect, he said, an inner voice said to me, thou shalt not kill, which is straight out of the 10 Commandments, actually. And he said this, he said, I let that part win. And he followed that. Now, to me, that's a prompting from a higher chakra, a higher sense. Not the original words, thou shalt not kill, they're just words.
Sure.
But the truth of it.
Yeah.
And he allowed that to win. So he allowed his higher chakras even then to rule his desire for excitement and to be one of the lads and to do, his nationalistic duty and to all of that for a higher reason, which is very different from someone who just won't fight because they don't want
out of cowardice.
All that, yes. Yeah. So that's an example. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, just to come back to these points here, I mean, the first one, I guess he mentioned sufficient care.
Sufficient care, yeah. So, the point I was coming to there, though, it's interesting that the Mars Sector 6 gives it after he's told you the whole path all the way to enlightenment. Then he brings this up. Now, it doesn't mean you don't do this until after you gain enlightenment, by the way. Yeah. If you're doing all these things, if you are being kind and tolerant and patient, and you could add some other qualities like humility into that as well, but that would all be part of the essence of what he's saying.
Sure.
Because he said egotism is a disease. Mars Sector 6 isn't a separate thing. Never let the golden dove of humility fly from your
Those are the most
leaving you an ignorant fool. So those qualities, if you've already got them, great, you've got a fantastic bedrock.
Yeah.
If you haven't got them as far as you should have, and I didn't, when I started this path, have them as much as I should have done, some of those qualities, you can still start, You can still go on, but you'll tend it along the way.
Yes.
And it'll come at different stages. I'll give you an example. Let's just take patience.
Yeah.
Ben Jonson called the poet laureate of Britain at the time of Shakespeare.
Oh, yeah.
Ben Jonson's one of our old poets here, 17th century. He described, wrongly, but kind of comically, patience as an asinine virtue. And it isn't. It's a wonderful virtue. But the spirit, what he's saying, I think, is this. It's kind of easier to be patient if you're a slow, not, a slow thinker who isn't so capable sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
If you're very sharp and you're getting to points quicker than other people around you, and this was difficult for Dr. King, who described himself as impatient, but as I said to him once, given what the situation you're in,
yeah,
you're probably the most patient man I've ever met, and with which he then had to agree. But it is more difficult. So this is relative to advancement. So you might have some of these qualities, and you might, as you develop and you see things more clearly, and maybe see things more clearly and quickly than some other people around you, because you're refining your mental abilities, because you're working on yourself.
Yeah.
You're developing. This is about spiritual development. Then you might again be tested on some of these things, such as patience and such as tolerance. Mm-hmm. You've got to tolerate someone who hasn't seen what you've seen, who doesn't know what you know, from experience, not from theory, not believing you. I've, as I said before, I've done a lot of media, so I'm very used to this. I haven't always been as patient, although I was complimented the other day by someone a couple of days ago on an interview I did with a very sort of difficult interviewer. And he said, "You're amazingly patient." So maybe I've improved. But even so, when you're dealing with someone who's at a certain level, and they don't take you very seriously possibly anyway, and they don't understand, it's more difficult then to be tolerant. But we should still develop tolerance. Now, tolerance does not mean everything's equally valid.
Yeah.
What you're saying is as good as what I'm saying. It means you're entitled to your views.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the very early transmissions, some of the questioners to the Master Aetherius were quite critical of the Master Aetherius.
Really?
Of the Master Aetherius, believe it or not.
The points he was making?
In 1955, some of the group, while Dr. King was in trance, this is before he even became public, or probably just after, actually.
Okay.
Yes, very early on. Some of the questioners of the Master Aetherius would be impertinent. And it would make you impatient, and probably me impatient, with them for being
just
so pertinent to the Master Aetherius. But the Master Aetherius was gracious and tolerant with them. Although he was light years ahead of the people questioning him. It was done in ignorance. And so you have to develop some of these qualities, yes, and you need them. You need them for another reason. You need them to also, as well as being good things in themselves, kindness is just a wonderful thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But as well as being a wonderful thing, through these qualities, and this is why I can understand it better than ever, you start to control the lower energies.
I see.
Patience if it's properly done, is a way of controlling energies within you.
Yeah.
Especially in the lower.
You can see that, can't you?
Yeah.
That's what it would have.
Yeah. So all these qualities, and you started with care, it also includes to ourselves as well. Mm-hmm. And you should treat yourself with care. Dr. King advised, we do a mission that some people will know of called Operation Prayer Power. And in Operation Prayer Power, especially now, some of the people taking part are gaining a very high level of consciousness, actually. Mm-hmm. They're not doing it for themselves. They're doing it for others through prayer, although it will affect the individual. And Dr. King did say, when you've done Operation Prayer Power, or doing the mantra at it, which is a very high form of prayer, don't immediately walk out of prayer power and just go back to ordinary life. Come down slowly. So even from something like that, it's having care over the state you're in, having care of of the conditions you're in. Be careful what you say and to who you say. There's no point in getting to a needless argument with someone about truth. There's no point necessarily in even telling people what experiences you've had at all, unless it's going to in some way help them.
Yeah.
And you should do it with great care, because you can be attacked, you can, and not only on this realm, You can have interference. So you need to be careful about these things. So it's very good advice, and careful with yourself. And some of the other things, you've read them all, haven't you? So kindness, you also need to be kind and patient with your lower self. With your own lower self.
As well.
Yeah, you'll have these thoughts, and rather than, oh, that's terrible, that doesn't work anyway.
Yeah.
A lot of this comes to the what we call the fishing line practice, which is in realize you're in the potential,
Yes.
where you allow the thoughts to reel out like on a fishing line, and then when you're ready, you reel them in. And these qualities will help you to do that smoothly.
It's interesting because it's like you can apply all of these to not just other people, but to yourself and even to society as a whole, because these qualities of kindness, patience, and tolerance, I mean, we need them all, really. I mean, we need them all to live in the world and to be of service to others, and to be amongst the clatter and the foulness of smell, as the Master Aetherius says in Free Will.
And I want to emphasize one word in those four: sufficient. He doesn't say unlimited.
Yeah.
He's very precise, Mars said to say. Sufficient care, sufficient kindness, sufficient patience, sufficient tolerance. There is a limit.
Yeah.
Well, no, because I think this is, I mean, we've all heard the saying, be cruel to be kind.
Yeah.
There is a time where if you tolerate something too much, you're allowing it to fester, you're allowing it to grow.
So that's the balance. Okay.
There is a balance.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a limit. There's a sort of time when, okay, I've been patient. That's enough now. So you're feeling your way through it.
Yeah.
Qualities you need, but only to a degree.
Yeah.
And you have to find that degree.
Well, that's interesting as well, because just in the word right service, I mean, it's sort of implying a similar thing that, what is service and what is the right service?
Well, then we go on, don't we? So we have the four things, just to remind people: sufficient care, sufficient kindness, sufficient patience, sufficient tolerance. Then we have, if he tends it with intelligence. I love that one myself. I think that's very important indeed. I can give you numerous examples of that. But one has to be intelligent about developing one's enlightenment. One has to be intelligent about the way one gives service. I've seen people have great aspirations to serve, but there are things you need to do to put yourself in a position to serve, and you need to use your intelligence. One obvious one is money.
Yeah.
You need to have sufficient money. You need to live in the place that you need to live in order to really give this effective service. You need to have the skills that you need to really give effective service, and you need to understand as well the experiences you have. And I want to stress here, although I've emphasized the higher chakras, the lower chakras are also very valuable. I mean, the base chakra, which I think a lot of people kind of unknowingly avoid, can bring tremendous stability to you and good conduct and sensible values.
I see.
Which you need. It's just that's not all there is.
Yeah.
About your life. The sex center, it can also bring with it great feeling of compassion.
Yeah, people don't often think that.
No, I mean, it depends how you use it, how you use all these. The sex center, as I've said before, I don't think all the chakras, myself, I don't think, they're all the same size, or they're all meant to be equally important, all the 7 chakras. They're all vitally important. They have different focuses and different functions, which I'm talking about in some events I'm running, and how we use those. But as you start to awaken them, they don't. I mean, the reason the sex center is so important to us on Earth is because of the way it's been used. But it could be used in a way of great compassion as well, and certain psychic ability. And the solar plexus center, a lot of the mental abilities you have relate to that center. I have a particular experience because I did a lot of clairaudience. So I had an experience where years ago, Dr. King, it'd be in the 80s, he knew I was psychic. I used to report to him. I actually got a message for him when he got the Freedom of the City of London from Winston Churchill, and I gave it to him. And I was getting a lot of clairaudient messages in those days. And he knew that. In fact, he asked me to give him a reading. Can you imagine giving a psychic reading for Dr. King? And I whether he was testing me or what he was doing, I don't know. But at one point, he did say to me on a particular mission we were doing, I want you to get the answer from the Cosmic Masters today. And he told me how it would sound. because he knew I practiced clairaudience, and I failed to do. I tried. I felt the answer, but I didn't hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him, and what I felt turned out to be right, but someone says, I guess, but I didn't hear it. And then he said after that the master's concerned, in the nicest possible way, had said that they'll only give that kind of answer to him.
Mm-hmm.
But he told me what the sound was. Now, there are sounds connected to the heart center, which are multiple, and you hear them in different ways. There are some that you can hear, and they. I mean, I've heard some. They can be quite distant, especially if you've got a little bit of tinnitus or ringing in the ears, or the blood ringing in the ears, or you've got to detach from all that. A little bit like when you're seeing clairvoyance, you've got to detach from a photoelectric
the physical.
Yeah. So, and the sounds that I've now heard since my experience, by the way, because I've never really focused on those sounds before.
Mm-hmm.
Being clairaudient, are some you hear, like they say, the conch shell sound of the shell, the gong is one. Sometimes a harmonic chord. There's a pealing of bells, which I haven't heard. Alison, my wife, has. Some have. You'll hear different things. But this particular sound that he told me about was sort of what they call, and I found it later in Sivananda's writing, a chinny chin chin sound. Yeah. And I've heard it this year. So, what am I? I'm almost 40 years too late for the job.
For the task, yeah.
But I think, though, the point I was making there, why it's relevant to what we're talking about here, is that the energies were, because I was doing clairaudience, I now think predominantly through the solar plexus center.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, he was taking me to a higher place, which I didn't get to then. My clairaudience, because I've done so much of it, gravitates, and I can do it pretty accurately, very accurately now, really. But it's been solar plexus based instead of heart center based, which comes back to these knots. And so I think that's, again, an example of a habitual thing going on. And it comes back to the use of these different chakras. They can do many things. The solar plexus center, as defined by the Ascended Master Saint Guling, is where understanding is launched. So coming back to what the intelligence here, we're talking about tending with intelligence, you need to apply your intelligence to the experiences you're having and translate them. Let me give you another very quick example. When you're in an elevated state, you can feel, I am what I meditate on.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say you're meditating on the galaxy, you kind of become, you're feeling, I am, or you're taken to that state. Yeah. I am the universe, I am the galaxy, after all, I am divine, I'm everything.
Mm.
When you come out of it, though, you're not in that state.
Yeah.
So there's a paradox. Every true mystic can cope with paradox. There's a little saying from the Spiritual Freedom Show. If you can't live with paradox, because there are some, and this is one, that I am a limited, humble person, flawed in many ways, who is learning, and I am divine perfection. And the two aren't the same. Mm-hmm. And it takes intelligence, to a degree, to grapple with that difference and live in the ordinary world and cope with the ordinary world and understand and use, in this case, a lower center maybe, to understand the experiences you've got, or a lower center co-joined, let me say, with higher ones.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to how it can be relevant for people at any stage of this journey, because not only are these all qualities that we can begin to develop, but that we'll certainly need when we're at this stage, as you said, but these, being able to break through each one of these knots and experience the next level, you could say, above that, is something that will be like that watershed moment on our path.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it can come at many different stages. And also, even if you've had experiences of elevated nature, you've still got work. I certainly have got a lot of work to do still with the lower centers. And that's the difference between, say, me and Dr. King, although he was actually very humble. He said to me one day, I'm going to give the longest lecture I've ever given, and it's going to be called The Flaws or the Mistakes, I think he said, of Dr. George King. So this is something he said to me on a car drive.
Yeah.
That shows you his humility.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I think there's lots of tips that we can take away there.
So we must before we leave, not because the most important on that list, I think, is the last one. If he tends it by manipulating his karmic pattern through the right service, and it's your higher. This is a reason to get more enlightened, because when you get more enlightened, you'll know what the right service is.
Yeah.
So the two go totally together, but this brings you tremendous protection in your development. Just the fact that you're manipulating your own karma through service, this is the greatest protection and the greatest help you can give yourself and others in your path of spiritual development.
Thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you.
There are three main takeaways from that show for me. The first is that materialism causes us to grossly overuse our chakras at the expense of our higher ones. And one of the keys, one of the secrets of the spiritual quest is beginning to use all of the chakras in the correct way, so that eventually we can begin to raise the Kundalini and experience our true spiritual potential. The second takeaway for me is that we need to begin to awaken our heart chakra, and we can all do this by practicing selfless service to others, expressing our true unconditional love. And one of the best ways that we can do this is through spiritual service, by beginning to radiate spiritual energy to other people, either through the technique of dynamic prayer taught by Dr. King or through the spiritual healing. And finally, if we all begin to practice on a daily basis, if we begin to cultivate those 6 qualities that we are given by Mars Sector 6 in the Fourth Freedom, by the correct use of all of our chakras, then we must be able to better navigate our journey through experience and prepare ourselves for our destiny of true spiritual enlightenment, which is what we all will one day achieve. Now, if you enjoyed that episode about the journey to enlightenment, be sure to follow, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future conversations between Richard and myself, going deeper into the chakras, psychic powers, and true spirituality. Now, if you can get to London or Barnsley at the beginning of March or April, then be sure to check out the link in the description for more about Richard's upcoming events, Awaken Your Chakras, Key to All Spiritual Powers. I also invite you to check out this video over here, in which we go deeper into the transformative power of spiritual energy, which anyone can use to change the world, or this video over here, which goes deeper into Richard's recent samadhic experience, so that you can learn about that in more detail. Thanks for tuning into the show, and see you next time.